Okay. All right, I clicked. Good afternoon, and a very happy new year to each of you. Thank you for joining this first university webinar of the year. We're so glad you're here. My name is Lynn Tipton. I'm director of the FLC University. Our webinar will begin in a few minutes, but let me first remind you of the setup for these programs. This event is live, and it's being recorded so that we can keep it in the FLC University Webinar Library. During this program, you may submit questions or comments by clicking on the questions section on the right panel of your control screen. We are not going to take questions and comments until the end, but feel free to submit them throughout the program. Even though this means there isn't the live interaction as we go slide by slide, we will make every effort to address your comments and questions. And the speaker will also provide you with information at the end of the presentation if you wish to get in touch with him. Joining me here in Orlando for today's program is Bill Kircher. Bill's also from Orlando. He's a strategic advisor to small cities and towns and some of their property owners and those persons interested in development through catalytic infill and other redevelopment ideas. Bill is a certified planner. He's an LEED planner and has worked much of his career in the Southeast and in Florida. He's emphasized much of his work for and with local government, including cities like Orlando, Lakeland, Newport Richey, and individual neighborhoods, colleges, and private sector developments as well. I met Bill at a Florida Local Government Coalition event last fall in Winter Garden, and I asked him to prepare this webinar because I thought the topic of character towns was so interesting, and I wanted him to share some of these ideas and his best practices. Bill, thanks for joining me. Let's get started.
Lynn, thanks to you and the FLC University. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Small towns and cities have just been fascinating to me for a long time for several reasons. First, my wife and I, when we travel, we always look for a small character town where we can spend the afternoon, have lunch, find something interesting to do. Secondly is, as an economic development guy, which is the end result of most of what I'm trying to do, small cities and towns have this terrific potential to attract startup businesses, entrepreneurs, businesses in the new innovation economy, and I'm not sure they realize that or conceptualize themselves as a great home for the businesses of the new economy, and kind of evangelizing about that is an opportunity that's available to most towns and cities if they can approach it with that in mind. The other thing that's fun about small towns and cities is that they're generally understandable. You can see the whole town. You can get a feel for the whole thing. Sometimes you don't understand the politics, but you can still get some sense of what the entire thing is, whereas in Orlando or some of the Lakeland, some of the larger towns, it doesn't come as easy to do that. And the last part is back to the economic development stuff, is that much like small businesses are the foundation for the national economy, I really think small cities and towns are the bedrock of American society. Whether people live there or work there, small town values seem to permeate our entire society, and I think appreciating that as an asset is critical to moving forward. I've tried to describe what a character town is, and there's a lot of words up there. It's got great neighborhoods. It's a good place for jobs, and the home of places that are generally civil and sociable, which is good. But most of the time, it's an emotional experience. If you ride into a town, or if you become acquainted with a town, it's more about how you feel about it rather than the bricks and mortar part of it. So while we try to describe it in terms of fixed assets and specific things, it's one of those things where when you're in a town with character, you know it, and when you're not, you also know it. So if we go to the first of three ways that I want to talk about small cities and towns. The first is the constituents that either use the town, are important to the town, or relate in some way to the town. Residents are obviously the primary importance of the town, and the first responsibility of any city is to take care of its neighborhoods, take care of the homes of the people that live there, make sure they're safe and secure and that their investments are in good shape and all. And what we're finding actually on NPR this afternoon, I heard on the way in, where the millennials have rejected the suburbs. Now, that's probably not true 100% of the time, but it's more and more people are trying to find places that do have some character, that have some interesting things going on where they can, again, understand their own town, but also find places to raise a family. And, you know, small cities and towns are great places for that. Visitors are another, I think, generally untapped user of small cities and towns. As I mentioned, when my wife and I travel, we look for it, and more, I think we're finding that tourism, small town tourism, visitors are becoming a more important part of the formula for putting together a revenue package for a city or an economic development package for a city. I noticed in the Orlando Signature magazine, they profiled Micanopy today, and the Hurlong Inn bed and breakfast has wonderful photographs. So visitors are an important constituent of any small city and town. And then we get back to businesses, which, as I mentioned, I think small cities are wonderful locations for startup businesses, for entrepreneurs, for all kinds of businesses where it depends on, you know, what Richard Florida called as the talent. People who can live wherever they want. They generally have two choices. They can live in a big city and find a neighborhood or a village, and, you know, whether it's New York or Boston, wherever it is, that has all the things they want in an exciting, intense environment. Or they can move to a small, in my view, they can move to a small city or town and find in those towns that have these characteristics, they can find interesting things, and they have a front yard, or they have some place, if they have a family, that they can create a lifestyle that is more suited to that. Now, of course, if they do that, the town still has to have the same infrastructure as the big city in many respects. It needs broadband, internet access. It needs probably reasonable access to an international airport. It needs business services. But businesses can, by and large, particularly small businesses and startups, thrive in small cities and towns. And I think that, again, is an untapped idea that deserves more attention. If you look at what creates competitive advantages for some cities, the residents, they need several things. They need great neighborhoods, vibrant environments where they have the schools and the libraries, and they're all connected, and you can walk, and you can get a sense for the history and the natural resources associated with your environment. Visitors, whether they're the day trippers or they're the weekenders, they want something interesting to do. And whether it's educational, it's recreational, it's cultural, if we can provide something interesting, then they'll do more than just have lunch and walk on the street. They may stay for the afternoon, and if there is a nice bed and breakfast or an accommodating hotel, they may turn from a day tripper to a weekender, which I think, you know, like Disney tries to do. If they get one extra day out of the tourist visitor, it's a really big deal. And I think small towns too is the same position. If you can extend the stay for people in your town, they're probably going to buy some. And then you have businesses, which I mentioned before. They need the broadband. They need access to the global systems, because most of the startups, most of the entrepreneurs, it doesn't matter where they live. It doesn't matter what time of day they want to work. It doesn't matter whether they're in a big town or a small town. As long as they have access and a connection to the global systems, they can do what they need to do. the other item there that's on the list is about workforce. And I think, as we'll talk about in a minute, partnerships with the school board, with the community colleges to make sure that either the trained workforce is available or it's readily available with some notice and some partnering is important. The second way I want to look at this, or that I actually look at it, is the process that leads you to this idea that you can attract and retain residents, which may be the easier part. You can do the same for visitors, and mostly you can attract and retain the businesses that are already there. And it starts with having some vision of what you want to do. There's this continuum of thought that says, and if you can envision what you're trying to achieve, it makes it easier for everybody. And just as an aside, I use the word community not to mean the city. It includes the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, it includes the neighborhoods, it includes a lot of people. And the vision for the community needs to be community-based. And if you can do that, which some cities have, and we'll talk about, is it's a powerful foundation for then developing a strategic plan for the city or the town, and it's driven by the vision. And then that strategy can drive all the actions of the city. And the continuum of thought idea says that the people in the field, the engineers out in the trucks, and the people throughout the city that are implementing your action plans, if it's visible for them to look upstream and see what the vision is that they're working on, then they're going to do a better job. They're going to enhance the entire situation. They're going to find opportunities that you probably didn't even think of. If you can create this obvious, transparent thought process that goes from vision through the strategy to the actions, and actually lets you re-engineer some things, reverse engineer some things, where some of your actions, when you look at them, you say, you know, what was the strategy that, what was somebody thinking when they told me to go, you know, put in this pipe or do whatever it is, and it lets you truth or check what you're doing, because if you can't connect an action back through the strategy to a vision, then something's got to be rethought. Either the vision needs to be tweaked, or the action needs to be abandoned, or something needs to happen. So this continuity of thought is important. Now, if I make up a hypothetical of what the vision, strategy, action is, I would say, I start fairly simply, say to me the vision of any place is that it needs to be an interesting, pleasant, and prosperous place to live. I think if every city and town could achieve that, we'd be in pretty good shape. The strategy gets a little more involved, and there are ways to enhance and protect the assets that you have. There are ways to shore up weaknesses that might be in your system. There are things that you can do strategically to help you, and the biggest thing to me is the cross-leveraging of assets and actions. As we'll see in a minute, we're going to talk about economic, social, and physical assets of the city, and if we can cross-leverage what we're doing in the physical realm to promote economic development, that makes sense. If we can cross-leverage what we're doing, particularly physically, to help the sociability of the town, and this is not rocket science or new things, but it's an important point to try to make sure that we're using all of our assets to achieve our vision. And this cross-leveraging idea is important to me, and getting multiple benefits from single actions is just a philosophy that ought to be imbued throughout the entire community. And then you have the actions. And again, we're going to get into economic, social, and physical things. But before we do that, we'll drop back and we'll look at sustainability theory, which y'all will remember the Rio conference in 1992, and they gave us lots of things. Two of them are memorable. One is that we should use resources today, remembering that future generations need to meet their own needs, and we need to not compromise that. And the second is that the world and all of its actions and activities can be divided into economic, physical, and social aspects. It's like the old 20 questions game where everything was animal, vegetable, or mineral for those of you that are in my TV experience. And it's the same thing with all of the activities, policies, programs of the town, is that they're either in an economic, physical, or social realm. And by thinking of it that way, it makes it easier to coordinate the three-part action that we need to do, which is to make sure that we take care of our residents, visitors, and businesses, and that for each of those we have a strategy and a vision that culminates in action plans, and that those are organized in either the economic, physical, or social realm. If we start with the economic, which as an economic development guy, that's what I always do, is there are two things that need to happen. One is you have economic development programs that I believe are the responsibility of the business community. The city needs to help, but the business community needs to be the leader of the economic development organization. You know, they're the chambers of commerce, they're those folks. And the city can be of tremendous help, but the business helps us. The second is the city budgeting process and financial planning process itself, which is the next slide I'll get to. But the coordination of the city's financial program with the community's economic development program is the package that I believe creates the most benefits. And again, you can see on the slide, we need to retain and recruit new businesses. Our workforce is important. And creating a nice place to live is one of the biggest economic development recruiting opportunities we have, and also for keeping people in town. If we can create a nice place to live, that makes it easier for people to decide to keep or locate their business to us. The last one came out of some work we did in Seminole County, where we did an economic development plan for a private business group that was working for the county commission. It was a very collaborative and strange arrangement, or unusual arrangement. And the thing came out of that was that everybody in town wanted to participate. The chamber, the downtown business associations, some of the other NGOs, the hospitals, the colleges, but they needed to participate in a way that made sense. So part of the plan was to make sure that every organization had an assignment that they were comfortable with, that they were capable of, and that they understood how it fit into the whole piece. So when you're recruiting future employers, and you take them to the community college, they're not singing off their own song sheet, they're singing off the one for this comprehensive economic development proposal. Same when they go to the hospital or they go to the organization of homeowners associations or whoever it is. So the assignments, you know, it's kind of a management approach to the organizational aspect of economic development, but it makes the whole thing work. The finance plan for the city needs to be comprehensive. There doesn't need to be any off-book items. I mean, you know, there may be, in terms of how each city operates, how they do things, but in terms of whoever's in charge of things, they need to be able to see everything that relates to the financial aspects of the city, and it needs to be long range. We have our annual budgets, which everybody does and does pretty well. We have capital budgets, which tend to be 5 years, 6 years, and you know, we're pretty good at doing that. We don't, by and large, extend our financial thinking out for 20 years or 30 years or even 50 years. Yet, we participate in bond programs that commit our monies for 30 years. We participate in other programs that are going to last certainly longer than 5 years. And the idea of the comprehensive long-range finance plan is that the city and the senior managers and the people with responsibility to take care of the city look long range and look at the sources and the sources and uses of funds. You know, it's an accounting term, and I think the accountants use it differently than I would propose to you, but we need to look at what kind of commitments do we have for road maintenance over the forever actually, because the roads that you have today, they're probably going to be there for a long time. They're going to need to be maintained, and making sure you have a finance plan for 5 years to maintain your roads is good, but it doesn't really deal with the true extent of the city's responsibility. And the same thing on the revenue side. And again, if we look at gas taxes, now we see mileage is improving so that there's less gas used. There's certainly alternative energy sources for cars. The gas tax, as we all know, is a fixed cent, I was to say dollar number, which I wish, but it's a fixed number of pennies. It's not a percent. So I'm not sure the gas tax revenue is a great source for funding future transportation needs. Now, how do we deal with that? We can wait till it's a crisis, which is what some city council people require as the response, as the predicate for them addressing an issue, or we can try to anticipate the fact that our road maintenance needs are probably going to go up. Our revenue sources are going to be stable at best, and how do we do that? And hopefully there are answers to that, but we just need to put ourselves in a process that lets us anticipate what we're going to be doing. The third factor in economic development is entrepreneurialism. There's a lot of social entrepreneurs, public entrepreneurs that are evolving in city government, county government, the NGO kinds of environment. There's a lot of literature that's starting to be written about who are these public entrepreneurs, what are they doing, how do we engage them in the activities of the cities and towns. They're different than their private entrepreneurial cousins in the sense that, with the exception of the abuses that we saw in The Big Short, mostly the private folks are dealing with their own money, whereas the public entrepreneurs are dealing with public monies, and they have to deal in a transparent way. So they need to approach it differently, but they still need to be able to take risks that are measured, risks that are understood by lots of people. And to some extent, we're already doing that. We're setting up enterprise funds. We're doing P3 partnerships, public-private partnerships. We're doing privatization. And all of that is at an increased risk level from just doing it completely within City Hall. And the training and the development of public entrepreneurs and public managers who understand how to be entrepreneurial and risks. And we're seeing more of that. And I think emphasizing that as one of the traits of our senior management folks is an important thing that's going on. The other word that I pick out there is incubators. And I think, particularly UCF, for those of us here in Central Florida, UCF is the national leader in the development of the incubator, the business incubator idea and business incubator locations. We have one in Sanford, we have one in Ocoee, we have one in Popka. There's one growing in Winter Garden. And these promote certainly startup businesses, that's their direct responsibility, but they also convey the idea that that's the kind of thing the town's interested in. It's imagery, it's economic development marketing as opposed to sales, and it's a reflection of the attitude of the city and its approach towards innovation. And again, here we get back to this idea that the sources and use of the funds and the finance plan of the town needs to be connected to the economic development strategy. Those are two critical things. Kissimmee does that well. They, when they develop each of them, they share them with their counterpart professionals. They make sure that if it's important to extend sewer service to a certain site in order to make it more ready for business development or economic development, that's known. They may decide to do it or not to do it, but at least it's a known part of the process so they can make an informed decision about how to use their money to make economic development. And on the other side, they understand what economic development is taking place, what impact that's going to have on their revenues, and how they can reap the benefits of that economic development in their long-range finance planning. So the partnering between the finance manager, the chief financial officer of the city, and the chief economic development officer of the city, that's a good marriage that should be pursued. If we leave the economic realm and get over to social infrastructure, as Americans, we have a certain disdain for social planning. However, somebody does it. Cities are social entities. Society is made up of socialization aspects. And there are things that the city can do that help a town become more civil, which I think we're seeing in national politics. They could use some help. And they can be more sociable in that, we're trying to build connections of people as opposed to help them be distinct entities separate from each other. And there are three things. There's programs, partnerships, and facilities that the city can control and incorporate as part of its infrastructure, its social infrastructure, if you will, that helps the town be a pleasant place. If we go back to our vision of being interesting, pleasant, and prosperous, being a pleasant place can use some help sometimes. So the city has programs that either celebrate successes or have activities that promote people getting together, whether it's the 4th of July and New Year's Eve or other things, and that brings people together. Every time a new park is owned, the city, at least the park designers that I know, are appreciative of the fact that so many people come out from so many different parts of the community, and they're all there. And as Olmsted viewed parks, is that they're the great democratizer of society. As everybody gets there, everybody's equal, and it brings the community together. Partnerships are an important part of what's going on. I'm not sure we ever did, but we certainly don't have money to do things alone like we used to have. And even when we had the money, I'm not sure it was a great idea. Partnerships let us enhance what we can do, let us appreciate what other people do, let us work in our expertise area and let other people work in their expertise area. And it's just a way of thinking about how cities and towns operate, is that they're looking for partnerships, whether it's with NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, the YMCAs, the Boys and Girls Clubs, whether it's the private sector through P3s and other kind of private partnerships, or whether it's within City Hall and getting the engineering department to partner with the planning department on certain kinds of aspects. So the partnership mentality is just really important. And then we have facilities, which, as we discussed, they're, in one sense, they're the easiest thing to talk about because we can see them and we know them and we can budget them, whereas economic and social assets that we have are harder to grab hold of. So when we talk about the physical facilities, there's lots of things we have to work with. The Athens, I think it has a new name now, in downtown Deland Theater, the library in St. Cloud on the upper right, and the Historic Museum in a small town in Kentucky, all are located downtown. They're all in walkable areas that are accessible to Main Street. And they become part of the culture of the town. The one on the lower left is actually my favorite. It's in a small town called Fairmont, Georgia, which I'd be surprised if anybody's familiar with, but 700 people. It's got a city square that is kind of marginally maintained. It's about an acre. On one side is a county road. On the south side is a one-story warehouse. On the north side is a very successful feed store. So it's obviously an agricultural community, or the center of the agricultural community. And on the west side, they have this little building, which is their library. And it's connected to a couple other little shops. And the image that I make up, at least in my own mind, is that the library must be really valuable because they don't have a lot of stuff. And to put the library on the city square reflects a mentality, an idea of community that I find really refreshing. So anyway, using these physical facilities, the libraries, the post office, the local history museum, and in all the towns I work with, it seems like almost everybody has a local history museum, which I've, no longer am surprised at. But 10 years ago, when I started looking at these, it was surprising, and they're all, I would say, they're mostly well managed. They're well kept up. The docents or the people that are volunteer to work there are excited about the history of their town. They're just wonderful little places. And like the Athens Theater, almost many towns have the old one-screen theaters that the ones who have been fortunate enough to preserve them now are finding lots of opportunities to reuse them as an asset to leads to socialization, as well as just it's fun to go to the theater. The physical aspects of the town consist of several parts. One is the neighborhoods, the other is the downtowns, the other is the historic and natural resources, and then how they're connected. And if you look at them all, neighborhoods we talked about a little bit, and the responsibilities of cities and towns to take care of the houses and neighborhoods of people. In the last 20 years, my profession, the planners have been doing a better job of connecting them, making them walkable, making them more human in scale, and working with the organizations that help or that take the ownership for them. Certainly the homeowner associations, but there are the PTAs and some of the others. And as you notice, the middle thing there is that the neighborhood is not just the houses, and it's not just the streets with houses. When you live in a neighborhood, you want to have a neighborhood park, you want to have a neighborhood school, you want to have some access to neighborhood shopping, and that becomes the realm of the neighborhood. And it hangs together if it's connected, if it feels safe, if it is pretty. There's a book out for the love of cities that hopefully most of you have at least seen, and the use of the word love is an interesting introduction into our technical vernacular. And beauty and prettiness, I think, is a corresponding term that, again, relates to this emotion of what we're trying to create. And certainly pretty streets and nice neighborhoods that are attractive is important. Downtowns, and in bigger cities, maybe they have separate mixed-use centers and activity centers, but downtowns in small cities and towns obviously play an important role. Their accessibility is important, having a variety of uses. I've talked about a couple towns where they moved the library out of town and they put it on the highway as opposed to the main street downtown, or close to the main street downtown. Now they got to wait 20 or 30 or 40 years when they rebuild the library again in order to move it back downtown and appreciate the power that it has to bring people together in a commercial mixed-use kind of environment that's on Main Street. Same with post office. Some move out, but some towns go to extraordinary lengths to keep them downtown. Again, local history museums, anything that is an attraction to both residents as well as visitors and brings them together, lets them be entertained, be educated, find some recreational value, and then go have lunch and a beer. It's there. The thing I'd spend a couple of minutes on is the hotel. I mentioned the Micanopy bed and breakfast. To me, having a hotel in a small town is a sign that something important is happening. First off, it's got to be either big enough or unique enough that there's a market that somebody will actually invest in building a hotel, no matter how small. So that's a good sign. The other is that the aspiration is more than just serving people lunch. It's providing something interesting and perhaps useful for them to do. And Lynn mentioned I worked in Newport Richey. The town there is a very interesting town, and it has a theater, a live theater, run by a fellow who's from Broadway. He was a sets designer for years in Broadway. He came, bought a theater, made a very interesting production place out of it, theater production, performance place. Obviously the sets are great, but also the equipment and the lighting and all that was first rate, as were his performances. The performances there. And people come from far enough away to support the theater because it's been there for several years. But there's no place in town to stay. You know, if you want to come and have dinner, see a show, and spend the night, you're not going to do it. You're going to get in your car in Clearwater or wherever you're coming from. You're going to go to the theater, and then, you know, maybe you'll have something afterwards and get a drink. But for the most part, you're going to go home. And it's a wonderful attraction, and the power of that attraction is just not being maximized. It's not being fully utilized. And of course, if there was a hotel or some other way to keep people there, then that would help the theater survive even longer. So it's, again, this thing that cross-leveraging assets is just incredibly important. So we'll leave the downtowns and we'll go to the historic and natural resources. Is, you know, if you don't respect them, nobody else is going to respect them. So using the historic homes, the historic business district, the river crossing and things that both create beauty as well as natural appreciation, just becoming part of the scene for what you're trying to do. Connecting them all is important. And then you get to this most elusive factor, at least that I found, and that's community pride. What is it? Again, it's one of the things I mentioned before, is the emotional kind of thing. You know it when you see it. But how do you use your physical, economic, and social assets to either create or enhance the pride people feel about where they live? And I think that ought to be an upfront topic for city councils and the senior managers to say, okay, we're doing all these things and we're spending money, we're doing regulations, we're having partnerships and things. But the purpose is we want people to feel proud about where they live. We want them, just because we want them to feel proud. Now, in addition, they'll own it, they'll take care of it, they'll do other things that are helpful. But pride is, to me, the prize. If you can create that, we're in pretty good shape. Again, we're back to the physical assets and the sharing and partnerships. The top right is a VFW place that the city uses for, in this case, a visioning workshop. The top left is a hotel in Tavares. And as somebody explained, to do something like that, you need the local developer to do it, because the nationals aren't going to step out and venture into a particular small city or town if they haven't found that there's somebody local who will do it and take the risk based on their better understanding of what's really happening in town. So you can start out. In this case, the fellow has 3 of these towers now right next to each other. And he's on a lakefront, and Tavares has fixed up the lakefront. Have you been to the lake? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Lynn's shaking her head. She's been to Tavares. It's really quite neat. And they used, in the economic development aspect, a factor that they had appreciated is that they're in the fly zone for seaplanes who come from north to south, south to north. And the seaplanes would land on Lake Dora. They'd come up. People would wade through the water with their gas cans, and they'd go get gas and stuff. And they finally said, why don't we actually welcome these people? Why don't we, one, make them feel good about Tavares, but also let's sell them lunch or sell them some gas, or let's make them part of our economy, which they did. They've fixed up their lakefront park, which is quite extensive, and the residents certainly enjoy it. They've built an 8,000 square foot pavilion that's incredible. I'd encourage you to go to their website and look at it. It is absolutely beautiful. It's out on a pier over the lake. And they built this park. This is one of the parks by the lakefront, and you will notice that there's a seaplane, that little yellow thing up there. And that gets into branding. I have come late to branding. I didn't take it seriously for a while. But Tavares has done a great job of working with the community. So it is a community-driven vision that has a brand of America's Seaplane City. And you appreciate that everywhere. You not only see it in the lakefront when the planes pull up. And I sat there with the former mayor, Nancy Klutz, and we watched 3 or 4 planes come in. People got out, had lunch, walked down Main Street, and had a good time. But that idea permeates the city. So one is it's fun. 2, it's economically important. And 3 is it created a resource that I think the residents appreciate. So it's got a whole lot of benefits just from taking that on. To wrap things up, we got a couple things that we can reiterate. First off, and this is almost, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir kind of thing, is leadership is just really important. Not only from the city and the town, but also from the community. As I mentioned, I think that's bigger than the city or the town. It's the non-governmental organizations, it's the people who participate and head up the Parks Commission for you, or they have their own United Way, or the different organizations that flesh out the totality of the community. And they need to participate, and the business community needs to participate also. So you really have the government, the NGOs, and the business community. They need to get together and do things. The idea I'm actually most expansive about is this leverage idea, is everything should be leveraged. If every item in the budget should create some multiple benefit, it should do more than one thing. And actually, I would pick, if I had to prioritize different competing budget things, that's one of the things I would use, is which investments create the most widespread value as opposed to just serve a single purpose. And then you got the economic, social, and physical aspects there, 3, 4, and 5. And you find that building a nice town, making a place a nice place to live, certainly helps people to live there, but it's also an incredibly strong economic development tool. The businesses in the new economy have to attract this talent, have to attract these high-wage, high-value employees who can live anywhere. And one of the things they're going to look at is they'll look at the job, obviously, and maybe how much they get paid, but they're also going to say, okay, now, where am I going to live? Where are my kids going to go to school? What am I going to do on the weekends if I have weekends? So building a great community is one thing that helps both retain and recruit businesses. We all have seen the sad phenomenon where an existing business leaves, and sometimes there are economic factors, but sometimes it's more environmental or situational, is that they just want to be someplace else. Socially, again, you've got the social infrastructure, you've got social capital, you've got the asset value of society, and how you enhance that, use that, leverage that should be part of what we do. And again, as a physical planner and as somebody who does comprehensive plans, that usually doesn't enter into the game, but it should. And it's a deficiency in our process, and it's something that probably is at the top of the list in terms of creating a great society. Is that a political term from LBJ? Okay, I didn't mean that, although I like that. But we need to create a society that is beneficial to all of our residents and our business people. And again, that's back to creating an attractive place. So that's my story. Again, small towns to me are just fascinating places. They're fun to be in. They're a joy to be with and talk to the people who live there and work there. And again, back to my main hope is that small cities and towns will reconceptualize how they think about participating in the global economy. Size no longer matters. Location doesn't matter much. Attitude, broadband, internet access, a welcoming attitude towards startup and entrepreneurs, those seem to make the difference. And if we have nice places for these people to live, then I think small cities and towns are highly competitive in the global economy. Thanks again for letting me be here, and I've
Bill, we appreciate it very much. Thank you. I did want to ask one question that I didn't mention in your intro. You're editing the charactertowns.org as a website sort of /resource place that people can go, and it's charactertowns.org. How did that come about? How did that get started?
Well, as I mentioned, I like small cities and towns. You find out that that character is a term that works for me in the sense of describing something special about a place. And as a city planning consultant that I am, you would hope that the cities with character, and there are many of them, appreciate that and they know how to protect it and enhance it. And then there are cities without any character, of which there are many, who can't have it. And I guess that was one of the conclusions I came to, was every city can become a character town. It may take 50 years. It may take attitude and leadership changes, but there's no reason that every town can't be that. Now, we can always think of reasons. There's 1,000 reasons why it can't. But once the community decides, if there's indeed a community-based vision, that that's their destiny, then, all these things, they're physical, they're economic, they're all things that are doable based on attitude, based on leadership, based on luck, based on partnerships. There are a lot of towns that partner with other towns to try to, bootstrap their way through there. But anyway, character towns are important. I decided to, rather than
build a site
leave
around
everything hidden in my computer, is that I would put it out there and see if it was of any use to people. So.
All right, that's an interesting part. One question that came in, talking about the roles that you identified in some of the partnerships, the person who wrote in asked if you find groups that a city's leaders would reach out to. Do you find that it starts sometimes more with something like a chamber of commerce, or is it more of a civic group? In other words, if you're just getting off the ground, who would a city leader approach? Do you find that some cities have had success with chambers or business groups other than a chamber, or a civic group, or maybe those are ands and not ors, but that's how it was written. So I toss that to you.
Well, it's certainly very individualistic, and you can find leaders anywhere, or hopefully you find a leader, but a leader can come from anywhere, just like a good idea can come from anywhere. And once that person emerges, they may be in the chamber, they may be in the city council, they may be the CEO of the hospital. There's lots of great community organizations out there. But eventually it's got to find its way to City Hall. And certainly if there's an elected official that is receptive to this, that may just need some help and encouragement, then that's a great thing. But
I could tell you were leading towards the city playing a catalyst role, maybe being the inviter, the convener, the catalyst. That's something, even if they don't have the set way to go ID'd yet, but that they can play that host or beginning role.
Sure, but that presumes that the city has a leader.
Right. Yeah, and one should never presume,
and
right?
once if they do, then wonderful. But if they don't, then what happens? Somebody else in the community's got to step up. The work we did from Seminole County in their economic development plan was actually instigated by 3 business people. They've been involved in county government for a long time, but they went to the county commission and said, we're not doing as well as we used to do with our economic development programs. We need to do some more stuff, and let's get ourselves organized and stuff. So, it's who goes first is a hard thing, because somebody may go first and nobody else cares.
Right.
And then you have a withering situation. But
so the leadership really needs that continuity as well,
yeah.
or someone to make a major commitment to see it through, because these things don't happen overnight. You talked about building things and a brand, for example, that can take decades, which is obviously going to take you through several rounds of leaders. Whether that is even through the different groups themselves. A lot of people don't stay put that long. We're a much more transient nation than we used to be, and Florida probably leads that number statistically more than many. So
that's true. However, again, City Hall's got to be involved, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the elected officials. Certainly a dynamic city manager can do things, and we know many of those. People can come out of senior management positions and incrementally introduce ideas, get people to meet people.
And once that buy-in gets going, then you kind of go from there. Great.
Yeah.
The last question that I had sent in, Bill, on the branding subject in that sense, other than the example you gave from Tavares, anything from Florida that really rang out to you, another example beyond the seaplane and Tavares, are there others that the theater that you mentioned, for example, with Newport Richie, that someone's been able to leverage almost like a physical identifier? They were just looking for some more examples.
Yeah. My favorite is Claremont.
Okay.
And the same person that did Tavares did Claremont, so there's a trend there. But Nancy Klutz, who was the former mayor of Tavares, is wonderful. But she, as a consultant, worked for Claremont. And for a year or 18 months, for some period of time, they stayed in this visioning realm, and they ended up having 3 workshops, each of which had 1,000 people come to it. Wow. Which for a small town of 30,000 people is, for Orlando, if you got 1,000 people to show up, you'd be scared. But so they did that. They took their time. They built their base. They created this community vision. And they built off their triathlon assets and their sports assets that they have, as well as, Claremont's got a lot of big hills that the not the motorbikers, but the other bikers really like. So they built on that. And the punchline is that either 6 or 9 months later, the city council was meeting on their annual budget and lamenting the fact that in order to achieve some of the items that were in the vision, they would have to increase the tax millage. It was either might have been 2 months, but it was any tax increase. And they said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and do it. And they did it. And in the audience, there were 200 people that stood up and applauded. Wow. And now, how many times do you hear an applause for a tax increase? Yeah. But it's vision-based, and I think the lesson is if you build a good base of what the vision is, then it makes it a whole lot easier either to impose regulations or to find financial resources or to do other specific actions if you have this support of the community as articulated in a vision.
I think the buy-in becomes almost automatic. I think you've got one more slide there for us, Bill, with contact information as well. I just want to make sure that everybody gets to see that. One more.
Maybe they will.
There it is, right, with contact information for Bill. Again, this webinar has been recorded, and as of tomorrow will be part of the Florida League of Cities University website. If you go to www.floridaleagueofcities.com and click on our training tab and then go to the webinar section, you will see all of these webinars listed, including this one. Some of your colleagues might have missed out on it, and we certainly want to encourage you to share what you've learned with everyone else. I want to take a minute and thank Bill so much for coming and bringing the Character Town talk to us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And we also are going to be following this up with an article in a future issue of Quality Cities to kind of keep the conversation going. And folks, if you'll let us know your training needs and or webinar ideas, we'd sure love to hear from you on that. Again, this is Lynn Tipton at the FLC University department down in Orlando. And I want to thank everybody who participated today. Thank you very much for sticking with us. And again, a very happy new year to you. Look forward to either seeing you at future League events or having you participate on future League webinars. Thank you.